The moment General James Harrison's eyes met Dr. Amara Chen's, 25 years of buried history crashed into the sterile hospital room. His hand, decorated with battle scars and a wedding ring he'd never removed, trembled slightly as recognition dawned. She was older now, her once jet-black hair streaked with silver, but those determined eyes hadn't changed. The same eyes that had once looked at him with love, then with heartbreak, now regarded him with professional detachment. "General Harrison," she said coolly, "I understand you've requested our hospital's top surgeon. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that explore the complexities of human relationships and second chances." The military transport helicopter had landed at Boston Memorial Hospital just 3 hours earlier, carrying the decorated 4-star general who had collapsed during a classified briefing. The diagnosis: a rare cardiac condition requiring immediate specialized surgery. When conscious, Harrison had demanded the best surgeon available, never imagining he would come face to face with the woman he'd left behind to pursue his military career. "Amara," he whispered, the formal title of doctor suddenly impossible to form. The surgical team exchanged confused glances. Dr. Chen's reputation for unflappable professionalism was legendary throughout the hospital. Yet something in her expression shifted momentarily before she regained her composure. "I'll need everyone to clear the room while I examine the patient," she instructed, her voice betraying nothing of the storm brewing inside her. As the door closed behind the last nurse, silence engulfed them, a silence heavy with unspoken words and paths not taken. "Of all the hospitals in all the world," James finally said with a weak attempt at humor. "You requested the top surgeon." "That's me." Amara's voice was clinical as she reviewed his chart. "Your condition is serious, General. The aortic dissection requires immediate intervention." "Are you going to refuse to operate?" he asked directly, knowing her well enough, even after all these years, to sense her internal conflict. Amara finally looked up from the chart, her professional mask slipping just enough to reveal a glimpse of the young medical student he'd once loved. "I took an oath to save lives, regardless of who's on my table," she replied. "Even when it's the man who walked away from our engagement without looking back." The monitor tracking James's heart rate betrayed his emotional response with a series of accelerated beeps. 25 years earlier, Second Lieutenant James Harrison had been faced with an impossible choice: accept a prestigious Special Forces assignment that would advance his promising military career or stay with Amara and the life they'd planned together. He'd chosen his career, believing they could make a long-distance relationship work. But the classified nature of his assignments, the months of silence, and his gradual emotional withdrawal had eventually broken them. By the time he returned from his first deployment, Amara had returned his ring with a note: "I can't be second place in someone's life." Now, as he lay vulnerable in a hospital gown, the successful general who commanded thousands realized how much his ambition had cost him. "I never stopped thinking about you," he admitted. Amara's hand stilled on his chart. "That's not relevant to your treatment, General Harrison." "It's relevant to me, Amara. Facing mortality has a way of clarifying what matters." She placed the chart down with deliberate care. "You have approximately 6 hours before surgery. I suggest you use that time to contact your family." The word family hung between them, another reminder of the life they hadn't built together. "My sister is my only family," he said quietly. "I never married." Something flickered across Amara's face, surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. But her professional demeanor quickly returned. "I'll have the nurse bring you the consent forms. The procedure carries significant risks, but without it." She didn't need to finish the sentence. As she turned to leave, James reached out, his fingers brushing her white coat. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for now, but for then." Amara paused at the door. Without turning, she said, "I'll see you in the operating room, General," and was gone. The hours before surgery passed slowly. James made the necessary calls, including one to his sister Claire, who promised to be on the next flight. He updated his will and wrote several letters to be delivered in case he didn't survive. One was addressed to Dr. Amara Chen. Meanwhile, Amara retreated to her office, closing the door before allowing herself a moment of weakness. She sank into her chair, hands slightly shaking as memories flooded back, their first meeting in the university library, the small apartment they'd shared, the dreams they'd whispered to each other late at night. She'd been so certain he was her future. After their breakup, she'd thrown herself into her medical career with singular focus, becoming one of the country's most respected cardiothoracic surgeons. She'd had relationships since James, even a brief marriage that ended amicably, but no one had ever made her feel the way he had. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Dr. Chen? It was Dr. Patel, her most promising resident. The general's latest scans are ready. Amara straightened, pushing personal feelings aside. Thank you. Let's review them now. The scans confirmed her initial diagnosis. The surgery would be complex, with little room for error. Any distraction could prove fatal for her patient. For James. As the surgical team prepared, Amara went through her usual pre-operation ritual, methodically washing her hands while mentally reviewing each step of the procedure. When she entered the operating room, James was already anesthetized, vulnerable and unaware on the table. Scalpel, she requested, her voice steady. For the next 7 hours, Dr. Amara Chen worked with the precision and focus that had earned her reputation. Her hands moved with confident grace, repairing the damaged aorta while her team worked in synchronized harmony around her. Not once did she allow herself to think of the patient as anything other than a heart that needed saving. It wasn't until the final suture was placed and she stepped back from the table that she permitted herself a deep breath of relief. Good work, everyone, she said to her team. He's stable. Let's close. In the recovery room, Amara checked James's vitals one last time before ending her shift. His sister Claire had arrived, anxiously waiting for news. The surgery was successful, Amara informed her. He's not out of danger yet, but the prognosis is positive. Claire studied her with curious eyes. You're Amara, aren't you? He's mentioned you over the years. Amara maintained her professional expression. I was surprised to see your brother after so long. If you'll excuse me, I have other patients to attend to. But as she turned to leave, Claire said softly, he keeps your picture, you know. In his wallet. All these years. Amara paused, absorbing this information, before continuing down the hallway without response. That night, alone in her apartment overlooking the city, Amara poured herself a glass of wine and allowed the emotions she'd suppressed all day to surface. Anger came first, at James for appearing in her life again, at herself for still caring. Then sadness for the years lost, the paths not taken. Finally, a reluctant curiosity about the man James had become. The next morning, she arrived at the hospital earlier than necessary, reviewing James's overnight charts before rounds. His recovery was proceeding well, remarkably so for a man his age. When she entered his room, he was awake, looking pale but alert. Good morning, General, she said, maintaining professional distance as she checked his incision. James, he corrected gently. Please. She met his eyes briefly before returning her attention to his chart. Your vitals are strong. The surgery was successful, though recovery will take time. Thank you for saving my life, he said. I know it couldn't have been easy, given our history. Amara finally allowed herself to really look at him. The young lieutenant she'd loved was still visible in his features, though time had carved new lines around his eyes and mouth. His hair was silver now, cut in the same military style he'd always preferred. I would have done the same for any patient, she replied, but without the coldness of their previous interaction. I know. That's who you've always been. He hesitated. Claire mentioned she spoke with you. Amara nodded, unsure what to say. I've followed your career, you know, James continued. Your research on minimally invasive cardiac procedures. The humanitarian work in disaster zones. I've been proud of you, from a distance. And I've seen your name in the news, she acknowledged. Your work in conflict resolution rather than combat. It's not what I would have expected from the ambitious young officer I knew. A shadow crossed his face. I learned some hard lessons about the cost of ambition. Too late for some things. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken regrets. I should continue my rounds, Amara finally said. Will you come back? The question held more than professional concern. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. I'll check on you this afternoon. Over the next week, as James recovered, their interactions gradually shifted. Professional discussions about his recovery gave way to cautious conversations about their lives since parting. Amara learned about James's distinguished career, his eventual disillusionment with military action, and his current work developing peacekeeping strategies. James discovered how Amara had pioneered surgical techniques that had saved thousands, her brief marriage to a fellow doctor, and her mentorship of young surgeons. You've built an impressive life, he told her one evening as she checked his healing incision. So have you, she replied. Different from what we imagined back then, but meaningful. Not everything I imagined, he said quietly. There were always pieces missing. Before she could respond, Claire arrived with dinner, and the moment passed. The day before James was scheduled for discharge, Amara found him sitting up in a chair by the window, looking out at the Boston skyline. Your final tests look good, she said. You're officially cleared to leave tomorrow, though you'll need follow-up care. I've been thinking about that, he replied, turning to face her. I'm due for extended medical leave. I was planning to return to Virginia, but, she prompted when he hesitated. I could stay in Boston for my recovery. If that wouldn't make you uncomfortable. Amara considered his words carefully. And after your recovery? That depends, he said simply. The unspoken question hung between them, could there be a second chance after 25 years of separate lives? I'm not the same person you knew, she warned him. Neither am I, he acknowledged. But I'd like the chance to know who you've become. If you're willing. Amara thought about the life she'd built, her career, her independence. She'd long ago stopped defining herself by the relationship that had ended so painfully. Yet standing here with James, she couldn't deny the connection that still existed between them. Coffee, she finally said. We could start with coffee. After you're discharged. The smile that spread across his face reminded her of the young man who had once captured her heart. Coffee sounds perfect, he agreed. The following day, as James prepared to leave the hospital, he handed Amara an envelope. What's this? She asked. A letter I wrote before surgery. In case I didn't make it. He looked slightly embarrassed. You don't have to read it now. Or ever. But I'd like you to have it. Amara accepted the envelope, tucking it into her pocket. I'll see you tomorrow. 2 o'clock at the cafe across from the park. I'll be there, he promised. That night, alone in her apartment, Amara finally opened the letter. Inside, she found 25 years of regret, apology, and enduring affection poured onto the pages in James's distinctive handwriting. The final paragraph brought tears to her eyes. If you're reading this, I never got the chance to tell you that letting you go was the greatest mistake of my life. I've lived a life of service and purpose, but never without the awareness of what I sacrificed for it. If by some miracle I survive and you're willing, I'd like to see if we can find our way back to each other, not as the people we were, but as the people we've become. The next day, as Amara approached the cafe, she saw James waiting outside, standing tall despite his recent surgery. When their eyes met, she felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in years, possibility. You came, he said, relief evident in his voice. I did, she confirmed, a small smile forming. And I read your letter. And? His expression was hopeful but guarded. Amara took a deep breath. And I think we have a lot to talk about. 25 years is a long time. We have time now, James said softly. If you want it. As they entered the cafe together, neither knew what the future held. But for the first time in 25 years, they were walking in the same direction, step by step, beginning the journey of rediscovery. Sometimes life offers second chances in the most unexpected ways. For General James Harrison and Dr. Amara Chen, it took a life-threatening condition and a surgical miracle to bring them face to face with their past, and perhaps, if they were brave enough, their future. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. They had separate lives, established careers, and old wounds that would take time to fully heal. But as they sat across from each other, sharing stories and rediscovering connection, one thing became clear: some bonds, despite time and distance, never truly break. And sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is give ourselves permission to try again. As weeks turned into months, James and Amara cautiously rebuilt their connection. Their coffee meetings became dinner dates, then weekend walks through Boston's historic neighborhoods. James extended his medical leave, renting an apartment not far from Amara's. They moved slowly, both aware of the weight of their history and the fragility of this unexpected second chance. I never thought I'd be starting over at this stage of life, Amara admitted one evening as they sat on her balcony watching the sunset. It's terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. James reached for her hand, his touch still sending a current through her after all these years. I know. Every day I wake up afraid you'll realize this is a mistake. Is that what you think this is? She asked, turning to face him. He shook his head. No. I think this is the universe giving us another chance to get it right. 6 months after his surgery, James received orders to return to active duty. The moment they'd both been dreading had arrived. I've been offered a position at the Pentagon, he told Amara over dinner at her apartment. Strategic advisory role. No deployments. She set down her fork, studying his face. And you're considering it? I'm considering all my options, he replied carefully. Including retirement. Amara's eyes widened. Retirement? But your career has been fulfilling and long, he finished. I've served my country for over 30 years, Amara. Maybe it's time to serve my heart instead. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. I won't ask you to give up your career for me, she said firmly. That's not a foundation we can build on. I'm not, he assured her. This is about what I want for my life going forward. And what I want is to be where you are. 2 weeks later, General James Harrison submitted his retirement papers. The ceremony was held in Washington, attended by high-ranking officials and decorated officers. In the front row sat Dr. Amara Chen, watching with pride as James received his final commendations. You're sure about this? She asked later that night as they walked along the National Mall. More sure than I've been about anything in a very long time, he replied, stopping to face her under the moonlight. Amara, when I was lying on that operating table, facing my mortality, I realized something. All the achievements, the medals, the rank, none of it matters if you don't have someone to share your life with. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. I'm not proposing, not yet. That would be rushing things. But I want you to have this. Inside was a delicate silver compass pendant. To remind us both that no matter how lost we get, it's never too late to find our way back to what matters. Tears glistened in Amara's eyes as she allowed him to fasten the necklace around her throat. I have something for you too, she said, reaching into her purse. She handed him a folded piece of paper. James opened it to find a letter of acceptance from Boston Memorial Hospital's Veterans Health Initiative. They need a strategic advisor for their new program, she explained. Someone who understands both military and medical needs. I may have mentioned your name. His face broke into a smile. You want me in Boston? I want you wherever you want to be, she replied honestly. But yes, I'd like you in Boston. A year after the surgery that brought them back together, James and Amara stood hand in hand on the beach where they'd once dreamed of building a life together. The decades between had changed them both, silver threads in their hair, wisdom lines around their eyes, experiences that had shaped them into different people than they'd once been. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd made a different choice back then? James asked as they watched the waves. Amara considered the question carefully. Sometimes. But then I think about the doctor I became because I had to stand on my own. The general you became because you followed your calling. We needed to become these people before we could find our way back to each other. Wiser words were never spoken, he said, pulling her close. That evening, as the sun set over the ocean, James knelt in the sand before Amara, holding out a ring that sparkled in the fading light. 26 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life by letting you go, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. I'm asking for the honor of spending whatever years we have left making up for lost time. Amara Chen, will you marry me? Amara looked down at the man she'd once loved, lost, and found again. The journey had been long and winding, filled with separate lives and accomplishments. But here they were, back where they started, yet entirely new. Yes, she said simply, her heart full. Yes, I will. Their wedding was small and intimate, held in the hospital chapel where Amara had spent so many hours seeking solace during difficult cases. Her surgical team served as bridesmaids and groomsmen. Claire was James's best woman. And when they spoke their vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Today isn't just about second chances, Amara said in her vows. It's about recognizing that sometimes the longest route is the one that leads us exactly where we need to be. James's voice was thick with emotion as he responded, some people spend their whole lives searching for their purpose. I was fortunate enough to find mine twice, once in service to my country, and now in a lifetime with you. As they began their new life together, James took on his role at the Veterans Health Initiative while Amara continued her groundbreaking surgical work. They bought a house with a garden where they could grow old together, making up for lost decades with each passing day. On their first anniversary, they established the Chen Scholarship for Medical Military Dependents, supporting the education of children whose parents served while pursuing medical careers. Full circle, James remarked as they announced the first recipient. No, Amara corrected with a smile. A new beginning. 5 years after the surgery that reunited them, Dr. Amara Chen received the hospital's Lifetime Achievement Award. As she took the stage to accept, she looked out at the audience and found James's proud face in the front row. They say that a surgeon needs steady hands and a cool head, she began her speech. What they don't tell you is that you also need an open heart. Sometimes the most important healing happens not on the operating table, but in the moments when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to reconnect, to forgive. She touched the silver compass that still hung around her neck. I've learned that it's never too late to find your true north. Never too late to rewrite your ending. And never, ever too late for love. As applause filled the room, James made his way to the stage and took her hand. Together they stood, two people who had found their way back to each other against all odds, proving that some connections transcend time, distance, and even the choices that once tore them apart. Their story, of a general who froze when his past walked into the room, and the surgeon who found the courage to operate on the heart she once loved, became legend at Boston Memorial Hospital. A reminder to all who heard it that second chances sometimes arrive when we least expect them, and that true healing often begins with the words, "I'm sorry," and "let's try again." In the end, it wasn't just James's heart that Amara had saved that day in the operating room. In finding their way back to each other, they had both been given a new lease on life, one they cherished every day, making each moment count after 25 years apart. And whenever anyone asked them the secret to their happiness, they would share a knowing look before James would say, "Sometimes the longest journey leads you right back home." To which Amara would always add, with the wisdom of someone who had learned life's most precious lesson, and sometimes, home is a person, not a place. As the years passed, James and Amara's love story became something of a hospital legend. Young residents would whisper about the surgeon who operated on her long-lost love, while veterans receiving care through the program James directed would marvel at how the stern general had found his heart again. Their 10th anniversary was celebrated with a renewal of vows at the beach where James had proposed. Friends and colleagues gathered to witness their continued commitment, many commenting on how their love seemed to deepen with each passing year. "You know," Claire said during her toast, "when James was in Special Forces, he used to say that the most difficult missions were the most worthwhile. I think finding his way back to you, Amara, was his most important mission of all." In their 60s now, they embraced the rhythm of their shared life with gratitude. Mornings began with coffee on their porch, regardless of weather. Weekends were spent volunteering at the Veterans Hospital or mentoring medical students. Evenings found them reading in companionable silence, occasionally reaching for each other's hand as if to confirm this wasn't all a beautiful dream. When Amara finally retired from surgery at 68, her hand still steady but her desire to pass the torch strong, the hospital named its new cardiac wing after her. At the dedication ceremony, James watched with undisguised pride as she cut the ribbon. "How does it feel?" he asked later as they walked through the empty halls of the wing that would soon save countless lives. "Surreal," she admitted. "But right. It's time for the next chapter." That chapter included traveling to places they'd both seen separately during their careers but never together: the ancient temples of Cambodia, the coastlines of New Zealand, the villages of Italy where Amara's grandparents had been born. "We're making up for lost time," James would joke whenever they added another destination to their list. "No," Amara would correct him gently. "We're creating new memories exactly when we're meant to." In their 70s, they faced health challenges with the same resilience that had defined their lives. When James's heart began to show signs of wear again, 15 years after his original surgery, it was one of Amara's former students who performed the procedure to implant a pacemaker. "Your wife revolutionized this technique," the young surgeon told James. "You're in good hands, hands she trained." "I've always been in good hands with her," James replied with a wink. As they entered their 80s, they moved into a smaller home closer to the hospital, where they continued to serve on advisory boards and mentor the next generation. Their scholarship program had grown to support dozens of students each year, creating a legacy that would outlast them both. On quiet evenings, they would sometimes reflect on the strange twist of fate that had brought them back together. "Do you ever regret the years we lost?" Amara asked one night as they watched the sunset from their new porch. James considered the question, his hand finding hers as it always did. "I regret the pain we both experienced. But I don't regret the people we became during those years apart. And I certainly don't regret finding our way back to each other, even if it took a cardiac emergency to do it." She laughed softly. "Always the romantic." "Only with you," he replied. On their 25th anniversary, 50 years after their original breakup, they hosted a celebration at the hospital where it all began again. Colleagues past and present, students they had mentored, veterans whose lives they had touched, all gathered to honor not just their marriage but the impact of their shared purpose. During the celebration, a young resident approached them, clutching a medical journal. "Dr. Chen, General, I hope you don't mind me saying, but your story inspired me to pursue both medicine and a relationship with my partner, who's deployed overseas. Everyone told me it couldn't work, but love finds a way," Amara finished for her, exchanging a knowing glance with James. "With work," James added. "And patience. And sometimes, a second chance at the right moment." As the evening wound down, they found themselves alone in the hospital corridor where they had reconnected all those years ago. The building had been renovated multiple times since then, but they could still feel the echo of that moment, the general freezing as the surgeon he'd once loved walked into the room. "If I had known then what would come of that day," James said, pulling Amara close despite his aging joints, "I might not have been so terrified." "If I had known," she countered with a smile, I might not have been so cold. You were professional, he corrected. And you saved my life in more ways than one. As they made their way slowly toward the exit, leaning slightly on each other for support, a young doctor rushing past stopped abruptly, recognizing them. Dr. Chen Harrison. General Harrison. I didn't expect to see you here so late. Just revisiting old memories, Amara explained. The young doctor's expression softened. Your story is legendary around here, you know. The surgeon and the general who found each other again after all those years. It gives the rest of us hope. After the doctor continued on his way, James turned to Amara with a raised eyebrow. Legendary, are we? Apparently so, she laughed. Though I suspect the story has been embellished over time. The truth is better than any embellishment, James said softly. In their final years together, as age slowed their steps but not their hearts, they found joy in the simplest moments, watching their scholarship recipients graduate, celebrating the marriages of young doctors they had mentored, holding hands during thunderstorms that once would have kept them apart. When James passed peacefully in his sleep at 87, Amara was beside him, her hand in his as it had been for nearly 30 years of marriage. At his military funeral, she stood tall despite her grief, accepting the folded flag with dignity. He found his way back to you, Claire whispered as they watched the honor guard. After everything, he found his way home. And I to him, Amara replied softly. In the months that followed, Amara continued their shared work, establishing the Harrison Memorial Fund for Military Medical Research. When interviewed about her late husband's legacy, she would always include the personal alongside the professional. James taught me that it's never too late to heal old wounds, she would say. That sometimes the most important surgeries aren't performed with a scalpel, but with forgiveness and second chances. 2 years after James's passing, Amara followed him, dying peacefully in the hospital where their second chapter had begun. Per their wishes, their ashes were scattered together at the beach where they had once dreamed as young lovers and later renewed their commitment as older, wiser souls. The Harrison Chen Scholarship continues to this day, supporting those who, like its founders, seek to bridge the worlds of military service and medical care. And in the halls of Boston Memorial Hospital, new generations of doctors and nurses still tell the story of the general who asked for the hospital's top surgeon, and froze when she walked into the room. It's a story about second chances and timing, about careers and callings, about the courage to begin again when life offers an unexpected opportunity. But most of all, it's a story about two people who discovered that sometimes the longest route is the one that leads exactly where you're meant to be. As Amara had written in her final memoir, published posthumously, James and I lost 25 years, but we gained a love tempered by time and tested by life. We learned that it's not about how long you love someone, but how deeply. And sometimes, if you're very fortunate, you get the chance to prove that true love doesn't have an expiration date, even when it takes a cardiac emergency and a surgical miracle to bring it back to life. In the years following Amara and James's passing, their legacy continued to flourish in ways they could never have imagined. The Harrison Chen Scholarship expanded into a full foundation, supporting not just education but also groundbreaking research at the intersection of military medicine and civilian care. On the 10th anniversary of Amara's death, Boston Memorial Hospital unveiled a permanent exhibition in the lobby of the cardiac wing that bore her name. Glass cases displayed photographs chronicling their remarkable journey, from their youthful engagement to their unexpected reunion decades later, through their years of service together and their final days. At the center of the exhibition stood a simple glass case containing two treasured items, the silver compass necklace James had given Amara, and his military insignia that she had kept after his passing. Beneath them, a plaque bore their favorite saying, "Sometimes the longest journey leads you right back home." The exhibition became a place of reflection for medical students facing difficult choices between career and personal life, for military personnel struggling with separation from loved ones, and for patients finding courage before difficult procedures. One afternoon, an elderly woman visited the exhibition, studying the photographs with particular interest. A hospital volunteer approached her. "Were you a patient of Dr. Chen Harrison's?" the volunteer asked kindly. The woman smiled, touching the wedding band she still wore. No. I was one of her residents, many years ago. She and the general saved my marriage. How so? The volunteer inquired. My husband received orders overseas just as I was starting my surgical residency. Everyone told us one of us would have to give up our dreams. Her eyes misted with memory. Dr. Chen Harrison called me into her office and told me their story. She said, sometimes life separates us from those we love, but that doesn't mean the story is over. She helped me find ways to maintain my relationship during those difficult years. The woman gestured to a man waiting patiently in a wheelchair nearby. We celebrated our 50th anniversary last month. Stories like these emerged regularly, lives touched not just by Amara's surgical skill or James's military leadership, but by the example of their reconnection and the wisdom they had shared. 20 years after their passing, a best-selling biography titled The Surgeon and the General, A Love Across Time, brought their story to a wider audience. The author, one of their final scholarship recipients, had conducted extensive interviews with them in their last years. The book revealed previously unknown details, how James had carried Amara's medical school graduation photo through 3 war zones, how Amara had followed news of his deployments with silent prayers for his safety, how they had both, in moments of personal crisis, found themselves thinking of the other and wondering, what if? When the biography was adapted into an award-winning film, audiences worldwide were moved by the portrayal of 2 accomplished individuals who found their greatest fulfillment not in professional accolades but in the courage to embrace a second chance at love. On what would have been their 50th wedding anniversary, a special ceremony was held at the beach where their ashes had been scattered. Former colleagues, scholarship recipients, patients whose lives Amara had saved, and soldiers James had commanded gathered to commemorate not just what they had accomplished individually, but what they had represented together. Claire's granddaughter, now a military physician herself, spoke on behalf of the family. My great-uncle James used to say that some missions take a lifetime to complete. Finding his way back to Amara was his most important mission, and their reunion reminds us all that it's never too late to heal old wounds or to begin again. As twilight fell, attendees placed lanterns in the water, each bearing messages of gratitude or hope inspired by James and Amara's story. The lights drifted out to sea, a constellation of remembrance for 2 people who had found their way back to each other against all odds. In medical schools and military academies, their story became a case study in resilience, second chances, and the importance of balancing professional dedication with personal fulfillment. The phrase, a Harrison-Chen moment, entered the lexicon, referring to an unexpected opportunity for reconciliation or reunion that shouldn't be missed. 50 years after their passing, as medical technology and military strategy evolved beyond what either could have imagined, the human element of their story remained timeless. New generations discovered them through historical archives, holographic museum exhibits, and the continuing work of their foundation. What endured most powerfully was not just the romance of their reconnection, but the wisdom they had gained through their separate journeys and shared final chapter, the understanding that sometimes life's detours, painful as they may be in the moment, lead exactly where we're meant to go. As Amara had written in the final pages of her memoir, James and I were given a rare gift, the chance to see how our separate paths had prepared us to truly appreciate each other when fate brought us together again. We learned that love doesn't always follow a straight line or a convenient timeline. Sometimes it takes a lifetime to find its way home. But when it does, you realize that every step of the journey, even the painful ones, were necessary to bring you to where you belong. And so their story lives on, in the lives they touched, the institution they served, the foundation that bears their names, and in the hearts of all who believe that true connection transcends time, distance, and even the choices that once seemed to end all possibility of reunion. For in the end, the story of the general who froze when the surgeon walked into his room isn't just about second chances. It's about the courage to recognize when life offers an unexpected opportunity to heal old wounds, to forgive past mistakes, and to begin again with the wisdom that only time and experience can bring. It's a reminder that sometimes, the most important journey we take isn't to distant lands or professional heights, but back to the heart we once loved, older now, perhaps, and changed by life's passages, but still capable of the greatest miracle of all, beginning again, with hope and without fear, exactly when we're meant to. The end.